The subject I now wish to refer to relates to the making of treaties. And treaties are made in Australia not only because of an express power, external affairs power given to the Commonwealth under the Constitution, but also in exercise of the royal prerogative to enter into treaties, which of course are done by the Crown on the advice of the government of the day. The Hague-based International Criminal Court seeks to investigate and prosecute those responsible for grave offences such as genocide and war crimes. The court's in the news because the ICC prosecutor, a Scot with the name of Karim Khan, is seeking the arrest warrants for several individuals in connection with the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Specifically, he's requested warrants for 3 Hamas leaders: Yahya Sinwar, head of Hamas in the Gaza Strip; Mohammed Deif, commander-in-chief of the military wing; and Ismail Haniyeh, head of Hamas's political bureau. But he's also sought warrants for 2 Israeli leaders, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, and Benny Gantz, the Israeli Defense Minister. These individuals are alleged to have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity during the recent conflict. It's important to note that this is just the first step in the process. A panel of judges now has to come together to decide whether to actually issue the arrest warrants. Now, most of our allies have condemned the proposed action against the Israeli leaders, treating them the same as the Hamas terrorists, but our Prime Minister, Mr. Albanese, has declined. He's declined it on the ground that he doesn't comment on cases in progress. If you've been watching the news, you'll notice that a number of commentators have pointed to a number of cases on which he has commented. There are 123 members of the ICC, but dozens of governments are not members, including China, India, Russia, and the United States. In March 2023, they issued a warrant, an arrest warrant, against President Putin of Russia for crimes relating to the invasion of the Ukraine. The ICC was established in 2002, seeking to hold to account those guilty of some of the world's worst crimes. Supporters say it deters would-be war criminals, bolsters the rule of law, and offers justice to the victims of atrocities. But since its inception, the court has faced criticism from many parties and has been unable to gain the membership of the major powers, including the United States, China, and Russia. 2 countries have withdrawn, and many African governments complain that its prosecutions have singled out Africa. US opposition hardened against the ICC under the presidency of Donald Trump, although Joe Biden takes a more conciliatory approach. Tensions remain. Supporters of the ICC say its most recent indictment, that of President Putin, demonstrates the court's continued relevance despite formidable challenges. Under our system, unlike the United States, entry into a treaty is done under the royal prerogative. It doesn't require Senate or parliamentary approval, although governments do inform Parliament of their intention to enter into treaties and submit them to parliamentary committees more certainly than they used to. Australia signed the Rome Statute, that's the Treaty of the International Criminal Court, in 1998. Ratification happened later in 2002. Alexander Downer, then Minister for Foreign Affairs, proposed the decision to enter into the treaty, but a significant number of prominent Liberals opposed our going into the treaty. Now, I was certainly not one of the prominent Liberals, but certainly one of the people who warned against entering into the treaty because it was a multilateral treaty and would take over aspects of Australian sovereignty, and we didn't think we should subject ourselves to such a treaty. And we warned that it was more likely that countries like Australia would be subject to the bureaucrats, the United Nations bureaucrats, than those who were actually committing crimes. And I noticed that Alexander Downer has come to the conclusion that this is very wrong and that he would support our withdrawing from the treaty. Now, in our system, a treaty can have no legal effect internally without legislation. But the Crown enters into the treaty on the advice of the government. The High Court on one occasion a few years ago attempted to give treaties some direct effect in Australia, but this has been successfully resisted so far. But it's always open to the High Court, which can interpret the Constitution as it wishes because there's no control over the High Court, and it can effectively give a new interpretation to the Constitution. That's why this program, Save the Nation, argues that these matters should be subject to the control of the people through citizen-initiated referendums. Now, legislation was passed to give effect to our obligations under the Rome Statute. That's the treaty about the International Criminal Court. And we can withdraw from the International Criminal Court, but this takes effect 1 year, only 1 year after the date of the receipt of a notification to the United Nations. It's not part of the United Nations, it's very close to the United Nations. As usual, the Swiss do things much more democratically than we do, and that's why this program strongly recommends our following the Swiss model. In Swiss constitutional law, more important treaties have to be put to a referendum before they are actually ratified. And others can be raised by citizens in Switzerland. There can be a citizens-initiated referendum. That is, citizens can take out a petition, and if they get sufficient numbers, that proposed treaty has to be put to a referendum. So certain important treaties have to go to a referendum. Others can be put to a referendum if there is a sufficient number of citizens who petition for a referendum. And that's what we should have in Australia.